Thank you so much for recording. Once again, thank you so much for having me today. And I am absolutely happy and grateful to share behind of the scenes of the Nibbling of the Night with you. It was definitely the hugest and the most demanding project I have ever directed and animated. And it's almost like a part of me and my life. So thank you so much for being able to join us today and being there with me so I can share my passion with you. First of all, I'm just going to mention that I absolutely love poetry and literature, and whenever I create and direct short animated films, I'm always trying to go beyond the animation medium and somehow link those projects with literature, with some further context, with some poetry pieces, and absolutely Gothic literature and Romantic era is a very strong source of inspiration for me. Previously, already a couple of times previously, I was actually using some motifs from Romantic era and Gothic literature, but this time I really wanted to dive very deeply into them and explore them in Nibbling of the Night. If you would like to see some others of those movies, they are all available on my website, apart from the Nibbling of the Night, which is not yet available online. And animation is such a great medium, and I love it so much because although I'm an amateur, I'm a student, and the person who works without a proper allocated budget, I'm funding those films on my own. Animation allows me to create stories which are set in so many wonderful places. It allows me to travel to all of those destinations where I wanted to be, and I can create stories which feature some of supernatural elements, which feature some metaphorical elements, and this is all this beauty of animation, which allows you to absolutely spread the wings of your imagination. And when it comes to Polish Romantic era and Romantic era as my own inspiration, I really need to emphasize and underline that I am a Polish filmmaker because I would say that my culture and heritage of Polish Romantic era is something very important to me. I was growing up embracing this culture. And I must admit that Romantic era, which happened in Poland slightly later comparing to some other European countries, it was a very important period for us when it comes to our culture, our literature, our poetry, simply because Poland didn't exist on the maps at that time. We lost our independence, so people were trying to maintain Polish spirit and Polish culture through simply writing and creating pieces of art, through creating pieces of poetry. So it was all there to just maintain the spirit and culture. And because of that, even nowadays, Romantic era is a very important period for us. And it's some sort of essential part of I would say Polish education to just dig a little bit deeper into Romantic era and understand all of those themes which appeared there. We had two key figures of Romantic era. The first one was Adam Mickiewicz, and then a slightly younger writer Juliusz Słowacki also appeared. They both were poets. They created lots of wonderful poets, lots of ballads, lots of epic poets, so lots of epic poems, so slightly longer pieces. They were very much inspired by Goethe, by Faust. Adam Mickiewicz especially, he's often compared to Byron in his writing style. Similarly to Byron, he was also writing those epic poems. And of course, Shakespeare was also a very huge influence and very huge inspiration for those poets. They were taking up lots of various themes in their poetry. We had a November uprising in Poland during Romantic era time, which also was an important part of writing about independence. But many of those themes which we can find in the Polish poetry, I would say they of course present Polish culture, but they are pretty universal, and we can see some equivalents of it in a European text written at the time, or simply at some other creations coming from some other countries. And when it comes to the Polish Romantic era and the type and the style of this poetry, it's very sublime, it's very high when it comes to the emotions, it's very dramatic. It has beautiful, very, I would say, sophisticated language. And those are those key features which I really wanted to use as my inspiration and somehow place them in the medium of animation. Adam Mickiewicz and Juliusz Słowacki, they wrote lots of stage dramas as well, of course, written in verse, written in rhymes. They weren't supposed to be performed on stage. They were much more for, I would say, like the theater of your mind. But of course, they were also very much into all of those like themes of romantic era, and they also were my very important source of inspiration. And when it comes to the themes which appear there in the Polish poetry like of those times, something which I believe sometimes isn't that appreciated as it should be is actually the fact that we have a great amount of very strong, very interesting like female characters, female heroines. And some of them, I would say, they are really, they can really be turned into wonderful like movies or stories, and they can become like role models, I would say, for like women nowadays. I would say they are very like inspiring and they are very powerful. I'm going to mention just a few. Personally, my favorite one is Balladyna by Juliusz Słowacki, which I could say is some sort of a female take on Macbeth, but of course it's set in Poland and it has lots of themes related to Polish culture. Another one is Grażyna, which is like an epic poem by Adam Mickiewicz. And Grażyna is the name which could be translated to Susie. Grażyna Susie is like an equivalent of the name in the Nibbling of the Night. And it was a story about a female knight, very independent and strong person. Adam Mickiewicz actually created this name, Grażyna. And he is also very important because of one of his earlier publications, which is Ballads and Romances, 1822, because this publication collecting various poems and various ballads was a certain, I would say, a publication which almost like started this Romantic era movement in Poland. And so all of those, I would say, like female characters, they are very interestingly portrayed in Romantic era like texts. And I really wanted to talk about the female strength and power in a movie which refers to the Romantic era. Another important aspect, which I also wanted to include in Nibbling of the Night, are like Gothic novels, Gothic literature. I was growing up reading them, and many of them have really a special place in my heart. So I thought about mixing some of the Polish themes and some of the things which are, I would say, maybe exclusive or very specific for Polish culture with some other like more universal, like Gothic themes, which are like internationally known and which could also make like this movie and this story more understandable for international viewers. So this is how the idea for the Nibbling of the Night was created. I had those four, I would say, like main points related to the story which I want to create. I really wanted to show this great heritage of Romantic era poetry. I really wanted to mix supernatural world with 21st century with our reality. Let me take a sip. And as many Romantic era stage dramas, they talk about like miserable people going through some sort of a crisis and some supernatural characters influencing the fate of those miserable characters. I really wanted to create a very similar situation, similar like structure in my film. And rather than actually adapting a story, adapting like a drama written at the times, I really wanted to somehow, I would say, um, uh, take this heritage and almost create like a modern take of it, create like a modern face for this Romantic era like poetry, just to be able to pass it to like younger viewers and just to be able to pass it to people who might not be that actually like interested that much into Romantic era. So I really wanted to show this power and value of Romantic era poetry. I wanted to create like a modern take of it, and I really wanted to almost make this Romantic era become like a part of modern contemporary animation culture. And this way, I would really wanted to just like prolong this heritage, which is so important to me. The story about female strength and emancipation, this was something which I really wanted to talk about. And exploring language, writing in verse, and creating a black comedy, those things were very new to me. Although I create animation, I usually create things which are a little bit more dramatic. So I have never actually like challenged myself with a comedy. And this time I had like a chance to do it. So I definitely wanted to explore some areas which were still new and unknown to me. But the most important aspect about Nibbling of the Night is creating and portraying this female alliance and showing very different female characters who anyway are able to understand each other, who are able to form this female alliance. And we have those two very different sides. We have vampire sisters, they are twins, and twins is also like a motif which appears quite often in Gothic literature. They are young, emancipated, they live according to their desires and needs. So we could say that they are like a complete like contrast and like a great opposite to Susie. But anyway, they are able to like understand her situation and offer her proper help she needs. And I was thinking that maybe it would be quite interesting to name them Carmilla and Laura, and this way just like pay homage to Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. But then I realized that like those characters are very important to me and very important to many other viewers, and they didn't want to like make Carmilla and Laura themselves like visit Susie and Billy. So I thought about creating some new characters who might give you this sort of like a link to Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. So I thought about Camilla, which is like a name with like an ancient like Roman genesis, and I thought about referring to Lucrezia Borgia, who was a very interesting like female character like in history, and she was very often demonized. It's a character which actually like made many people like interested in her life and in her story. Even Byron was very strongly like interested in her. He even had like a strand of hair which belonged to Lucrezia Borgia. But actually, she wasn't such a like I would say like character who should be that demonized as she was. She was a very interesting emancipated woman. She was supporting like artists. This is a very important part of her life, and I would say like nowadays we perceive her a little bit different. So I thought it would be nice to also like mention her and name one of the characters Lucrezia. As I said previously, this name Grażyna is a name which was created by Adam Mickiewicz, but the thing which I haven't mentioned is that in Poland we have this very strong stereotype of a badly educated, middle-aged, poor marriage of Grażyna and Janusz. It's a very strong stereotype, similarly to Susie and Billy in States and maybe Jim and Barbara in the United Kingdom. So as you can see, the stereotype like functions in many different like nations all around the world, and I really wanted to almost like play with this stereotype and reverse it and create a story of Susie almost going back to her romantic era roots and like re-embracing who she was supposed to be, because this character was created as a person we are supposed to look up to. She was supposed to be a female knight, very independent, strong character, like a role model for women. So I really wanted Susie to almost like go back and re-embrace this romantic era heritage. Vampire sisters, those characters really highly respect freedom, and they really want to like live according to their desires. They want to be free, and when they see that like Susie experienced so much pain in her marriage, they just like offer her to form this female trio. And I think it's a very powerful message, and I really wanted to talk about this female support, this mutual understanding, in such a way that it isn't maybe I would say quite explicit in the film, but it's something which comes as like the moral message at the end. And another very important aspect of this movie is that it does not only talks about like female strength, it only talks about I would say like female and male relationships, and this short line and this short scene with Billy is actually very important to me and very powerful, and lots of like male creators who worked on this movie who supported me, they said that they totally identify with Billy and with his situation, because he also is I would say like a victim in this marriage. He also is a person who is unhappy. Susie and Billy, they are both stuck in this unhappy relationship, and they should get separated. This is like the only way for them to actually regain the freedom and be happy again. Another, I would say maybe a very tiny like fun fact about it is that I believe that like the moral message of like Goethe's Faust is to be active, to remain active, to never like allow ourselves to actually be passive in life. And this important moral message of being active, of taking proper control over your life was something which I really wanted to mention when talking about Nibbling of the Night. I also want to mention like two other romantic era motifs, which I would say are maybe a little bit more noticeable for like Polish viewers. Um, this scene when Lucrezia and Camilla, they are so interested in Billy, and the scene with like two young, attractive like female characters being so like into this not that handsome middle-aged man is something which I also wanted to talk about, because in many romantic era, I would say like ballads and poems, we have this situation of this sort of a misalliance between supernatural female characters falling in love with ordinary people. A scene like that and like a motif like that is portrayed in Balladina, where we have a very powerful lady of the lake, Nixie, named Goplana, and she falls in love with like an ordinary village boy. And I would say that Juliusz Słowacki, writing Balladina, and many other poets of the time, they were inspired by A Midsummer Night's Dream. Nick Bottom and Titania being in love and having this very interesting misalliance. And another very important motif, which always, like I believe, is very touching and very strongly inspired me, is a motif which comes from a ballad called Little Fish in Poland. It's written by Adam Mickiewicz, and it talks about a young, desperate, miserable woman who just gave birth to a child, but she is very depressed, very miserable, and she asks like water nixies to accept her as one of them, and she indeed becomes accepted. She becomes a water nixie, but from time to time she returns to Earth to actually like take care of her baby. And this sort of a female alliance between a miserable woman and like supernatural female characters was something which inspired me very strongly. And now I need to talk a little bit more about stop motion animation technique. And to me, always the story comes first. I always write the script first, and only then I choose the technique which I'm supposed to like animate with. I dealt with like 3D, 2D, and stop motion, but this time I really wanted to have this very strong sense of three dimensions and this sense of almost like I would say a stage-like feel. I really wanted to be able to show my characters from every single angle to make them perform almost like they are on a stage. And that's why I chose stop motion. And stop motion is also a very good choice for stories which have some gothic themes, some horror vibes, simply because stop motion evokes this uncanny feeling. And uncanny feeling is something which people even like talk about in their PhD works. Simply our mind, when we see stop motion, it reads all of those objects as something which is supposed to be dead, as something which isn't supposed to be alive. But thanks to animation, we are tricked, our mind is tricked that they actually are alive, they are moving. And this forms this very uncanny feeling, which we can very easily connect with some horror vibes to emphasize them even more. And that's why many creators like Tim Burton, Henry Selick, they like create those like horror spooky stories using stop motion. It's one of like the reasons for it as well. Corpse Bride was one of my like huge inspirations, and this is like a movie which I really like. It's one of my favorite ones when it comes to stop motion animation. And a fun fact about this movie, I'm going to talk about Nibbling of the Night in a second, is that like Corpse Bride is actually based on a story which has some sort of like a Russian Polish origin, and it talks about like an undead lady who is cursed to be like an undead person, and she waits for somebody to come take the spell off and simply say that I like her. And this is like a story which also inspired Tim Burton when he was like working on Corpse Bride. And this story is very interestingly like portrayed in one of the ballads by Adam Mickiewicz, which is called I Like Her or I Like It. And when I realized that as a younger creator, I just felt so nice and so uplifted that actually when we travel to all of those like original, I would say like stories takes, when we read and when we commune with like art of romantic era, we can actually find lots of stories which are so close to us and which are so, I would say, like present in popular culture nowadays. And I always believe that actually, like finding original tales and finding those original stories can be much more inspiring for us than like viewing those like modern takes on them. So I always really like making myself like travel back to Romantic era and revisiting some of those like old Gothic texts just to like get some inspiration and also like realize that they are actually present in so many like modern popular culture like movies nowadays. And whenever I actually take up a journey to create a stop motion animated film or like any other animation, I always look at various like techniques and methods which professional creators use just to be able to almost try to recreate them in my like student environment with my very small or almost like non-existing budget. And the same thing happened to Nibbling of the Night. And I'm talking about the stop motion animation, but I think that some people might not exactly be like very much aware how stop motion animation works. So I'm going to show you this very short video, which is like a time-lapse video showing me animating Susie for hours in a studio. And I think that this video shows very well how stop motion works. Stop motion requires posing a puppet, taking a picture, and then posing it once again and taking another picture. And this way, when we have a big enough number of frames, a big enough number of photographs, we can speed them up and they can almost perform and play and pretend to be alive. And we have this feeling of characters being alive and moving in real time, although every single frame requires a new pose. And that's why it's a stop and motion process. And this is why this technique is named like that. I must admit that I have created a stop motion puppet animation before Nibbling of the Night once before, and working on a slightly smaller project, also requiring like work with puppets and stop motion sets was a very good experience for me, which prepared me for Nibbling of the Night, which was a much greater, much bigger undertaking. And at the time when I was working on this previous film, I took like an adaptation of a poem by Adam Mickiewicz, a poem called Upiór Phantom. Upiór is some sort of, I would say, a Polish cuisine of a vampire. And when I was working on this movie, at first I was thinking about talking about romantic love, which takes you to like to the edge of despair, which brings you madness and all of those sublime feelings. But later on in the process, I decided I'm going to just talk about things which are much more universal and much more important for people nowadays. And I talked about this sort of a very strong loss of a person which we experience when somebody passes away, and of the strong of like a desire when we wishes for somebody to be back here with us. So simply talking about the mourning period and talking about the loss of somebody who we love became like the main universal like theme of the story. And I realized that actually, thanks to having such a universal theme, this movie was understood in many other like cultures in other countries. It performed very well on like film festivals in Chile and Brazil. It was awarded there, and this made me realize that I can actually like embrace Polish culture. I can use certain motifs which are so unique and so Polish. But if I'm going to equip them with like proper moral messages and with some universal themes, people from like other countries will be able to resonate with them. They will be able to understand it, and this way, those stories will be also interesting to them. And now I'm going to just move to like the mere, I would say, like craft behind the stop motion and talk about like the creation of the puppets and the sets. As you can see, they were made using quite simple wires, cotton, some ribbons which I torn apart to create hair. I wasn't able to afford like a proper armature for the puppets, so the simple construction was something which was also limiting like the movements of the characters, but they were good enough to perform. And working with them was almost like working with the actors in the studio. Here you can see my very basic first versions, very rough, like drawings of various like props, which later on were built and which become a part of the movie. Everything had to be like properly measured and discussed in terms of how actually we are going to build it. And I was lucky enough to be able to have like a closer look at like some Polish interiors and get inspired by the way how the bedroom could look like when it comes to like Polish like bedroom in like 80s. I was thinking about creating like a neglected bedroom which shows the neglected stage of Billy's and Susie's relationship. And let's imagine that, you know, like they moved in, they decorated the bedroom, and it wasn't changed since like the very beginning of the marriage. So that's why it's still at the same, you know, like stage. So that's why I looked at like those things from the 80s. I even added a kind of like a small Easter egg with like a glass fish, which was some sort of like a gadget which everybody had like in 80s, and now actually they are very expensive and very unique, and people are trying to like collect them back again. So you will be able to see like some fish elements sometimes in the backgrounds. And I also like studied a lot, and I made like a very huge presentation with lots of like screen grabs of like various like scenes and like interiors from like 1931 Dracula movie, and from like many like other Dracula like movies, like Dracula Dead and Loving It. I was trying really to like look at and find many references related to like gothic like interiors, related to like vampire vibes, and I was trying to collect like as many information as possible, as much like inspiration as I can, and then connect those like gothic vampire elements with Polish architecture and with Polish interiors, mix them together, and almost create like a very new world from scratch, which naturally has all of those Gothic elements incorporated like as a part of their design. And in stop motion, you need to design and need to create everything. So even such things as like little handles, they also had to be made. I found like a shop in Cardiff which offered very interesting beads, and I made like the handles like out of beads. And simply, I think that this slide shows that like everything what we see in a single frame in a stop motion movie had to be like handcrafted, made, and designed to in order to actually like be there. Here you can see my rough designs of the house when I was experimenting and testing. And then I made like a cardboard version of it. I was lucky enough to cooperate with USW students from the set design department. As a student working with other students, I was able to like form those collaborations, and we were able to actually like discuss certain things together, use our knowledge from various areas, and take this film to life thanks to our like common creative work. So we tested things with cardboard, and then we moved to wood with much more solid materials. Here you can see my friend Rosie covering some props with plaster to make them a little bit like more solid. I was designing them. My friends were helping me to actually cut them out and prepare them, and then decorating and painting process was applied. And everything in this movie is hand painted, and almost everything is handmade. The only thing which is actually like 3D printed are, for example, those little fish or some other tiny props. Here's my favorite prop, and this is a bookcase. And as you can see, here are like various books with titles of many Polish poems and ballads and many other texts from the Romantic era. We even have like a tiny shelf dedicated to like some English texts. And I really wanted to like hide those Easter eggs wherever it was actually possible for me. Animation process was really tedious. It took a lot of time. Working on those 3 sets was very demanding. We had a huge bedroom set, a huge kitchen set, very well equipped. I was really trying to like make those interiors look as like inhabited by those characters, by those puppets, by adding like lots of tiny props, which they make them much more believable. I was changing mouths in order to make the characters talk and speak. The mouths had to be like drawn, then hand painted, then cut out. So a very multi-level, tedious process. Our fridge had a light inside, so it was very realistic. And a set which was also very demanding and which was very important for this movie to also emphasize this like Gothic aspect of the story was our proper Gothic setting, our spooky setting. In all of those like Gothic novels, you always have like a setting which is like spooky, which gives you those interesting Gothic vibes. And I really wanted to create this house on the hill and create a sequence in which the nature is like the dominant power, because nature is also like very often dominant power in many romantic era texts, in many Polish romantic era dramas. So I really wanted to emphasize this power of romantic era nature. Here you can see the set and the way how it looked like. I was working using a program called Dragon Frame to be able to view the frames and just progress with the animation. But before the animation process started, a very important part of it was actually to record the dialogues. We had a wonderful cast who made a wonderful job on actually bringing all of those poetic lines to life. I wrote the text originally in Polish and I made an English translation. It was really challenging to maintain the sense and maintain the rhymes. The actors made really a stunning job. They were acting into like an empty air, but their acting was very convincing, and it actually allowed us to make the characters much more alive. Before you start animation process, you also need to record proper live action references. I was performing them with my student friend who is an actress, and we were testing various, I would say like shots, types of like angles, and we were like pretending to be those characters, and it allowed us to record like a very good, like I would say, live action pre-visualization of the film. And then I was taking those pictures like based on the shots which we recorded. I was adding some tiny comments and I was taking them all to the studio in order to be able to work with the puppets and have like a pre-visualization with me. So I was well prepared and I always knew how I need to like animate the puppets in order to make them move in the required way. And here you can see a previs with Susie just speaking.
I've waited so long for the devils to come for this sinner's soul.
Yes, indeed. So she is here, and such types of previs are also made on like big budget, more professional projects. You simply take pictures of the puppet standing still with different types of mouths or with different heads, and then a thing which also needs to be like done is to create like a proper pre-visualization. All of those lines had to be actually studied, and it was very important to measure and count for how long we can display a specific frame in order to actually make the characters speak in a realistic way. So lots of counting, lots of pre-visualization was also applied here.
I've waited.
Okay. And as it was a student stop motion project, and I was working with many things which were handmade, and as I already said, like the puppets didn't have like a proper armature. Lots of things actually required to like be very gentle, to be very detailed, but also like stop motion animation was very unpredictable. I experienced like many very like unpredictable situations when suddenly something was just getting broken. Sometimes even in the middle of the shot, like a puppet could, you know, like experience like an issue with her hand, and like over here the wrist got broken. And those things like made me like have a very high level of adrenaline when I was working in the studio. And stop motion was like very unpredictable. So like every day, every single shot was a challenge. And puppets sometimes they were also like a little bit like misbehaving on the sets, and they were like actors who also like needed to be very gentle and detailed when it comes to working with them. And another very important aspect of like working on this film was post-production. So something which happens when all of the shots were already like recorded. We had to like remove lots of like cracks, lots of wrinkles which appear somewhere there as a part of like the look of those puppets. I was trying to make them look much more human, much more realistic, and that's why all of those like cracks, wrinkles, all of those like imperfections were erased. And I think that this way actually they are much more believable. This post-production was a very long process. It was definitely a multi-level process. There was a time when I was thinking that maybe I can make them look like puppets, keep some cracks, but then I decided to actually push it even further and make it much more detailed in order to just make them look like proper humans. And the last stage, I would say, of like working on the film is actually like sending it to various film festivals, sending it to the festival circuit. And this is something which takes place now. This is something which Nibbling of the Night is going through now. I'm actively like sending Nibbling of the Night to like various film festivals like in Poland and internationally, in the UK as well. I also wanted to mention that if you would like to have a copy of the film for your own usage, I would be very grateful if you could support our crowdfunding campaign. We are collecting funds in order to be able to cover submission fees, because quite often film festivals, especially those more professional ones, they have even quite high like submission fees which have to be covered. If we get selected, we already got selected for some film festivals. It would be great to also be able to actually travel there. So like this support also would be used for like covering some travel expenses. So if you would like to have a copy of the Nibbling of the Night and support us in sending our film to this festival circuit, I would be very grateful. And I also wanted to mention, I'm going to take off this tiny tab, is the fact that like the puppets and props are available. So if you would like to actually create a new home for the film puppets, or if you would like to receive like one of the film props, please support us. And it's like possible to purchase puppets and props from the film. Thank you so much. I think that's the end from my side. As the last thing, I just really wanted to mention that if you would like to stay in touch with me, if you would like to follow the Nibbling of the Night and its like farther story, please feel free to like follow our Instagram. I would be very grateful. You can find me and my contact details on my website. Lots of movies which I'm working on, which I created previously, are available there. And you can also find me as Gabi Bania, in social media, or even drop me like an email. So I would be happy to stay in touch and answer maybe some personal questions or private ones if you have any. Once again, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them now. Thank you so much for staying so long with me. I hope that you aren't bored after the presentation. I'm really, really grateful that you stayed for so long and that you were like till the very end of my talk. Thank you so much.